It's 1942. Japanese control in the Pacific reaches its greatest extent, from the north of Manchuria to the island of New Guinea, and from the western border of Burma to the Marshall Islands. But all that will change in early 1942. As the new year begins, American codebreakers have cracked the Japanese Navy's JN-25 code. This marks the first time the United States are able to anticipate what the Japanese key strategic moves will be, and the first time the odds shift in favor of the Allies. Cracking the JN-25 code is a major turning point in the war, but 1942 has just begun, and the rest of the year will see more dramatic setbacks for the Axis in the Pacific theater. In fact, the very next major Allied blow against Japan will see one of the most significant turning points of World War II, the Battle of Midway. By early 1942, Japan's aggressive expansion across the Pacific had reached its zenith. Following the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Japanese Empire had rapidly conquered vast territories, from the Philippines to the Dutch East Indies. Their goal, to establish a defensive perimeter extending across the Pacific, ensuring dominance over Asia and securing vital resources. The United States, reeling from Pearl Harbor and subsequent defeats, was determined to halt Japan's momentum. The strategic importance of Midway Atoll, a tiny speck in the Pacific, became clear. Positioned roughly halfway between Asia and North America, Midway was a critical outpost for both sides. Control of Midway would provide a launching pad for further operations and a shield against enemy advances. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attack, devised a bold plan to lure the US Navy into a trap. Yamamoto aimed to eliminate the remaining American aircraft carriers by launching a surprise attack on Midway, thereby crippling US naval power and securing Japan's dominance in the Pacific. The Japanese plan was intricate and relied heavily on deception. A diversionary attack on the Aleutian Islands would draw American forces north, while the main fleet, comprising 4 of Japan's finest carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, would strike Midway. If successful, this operation would eliminate the United States as a strategic threat and allow Japan to consolidate its gains. However, the Japanese had underestimated the United States' intelligence capabilities. American cryptanalysts, led by Joseph Rochefort, had made a crucial breakthrough. They had cracked the Japanese Navy's JN-25 code, gaining access to their plans and communications. By late May 1942, American intelligence had deciphered enough of the Japanese messages to understand the imminent threat to Midway. Armed with this knowledge, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, devised a plan to turn the Japanese trap into a devastating ambush. Nimitz's forces, including the carriers USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the hastily repaired USS Yorktown, were ordered to intercept and destroy the Japanese fleet. On June 3, 1942, the first shots of the Battle of Midway were fired. American reconnaissance aircraft, patrolling the vast expanse of the Pacific, spotted elements of the Japanese invasion force, including transport ships and escorting warships, approaching Midway Atoll. This initial sighting prompted US commanders to launch a series of preemptive strikes. B-17 flying fortresses from Midway were dispatched to attack the Japanese transports. However, these high-altitude bombing runs were largely ineffective, causing minimal damage to the enemy vessels. Despite this, the sighting of the Japanese force confirmed that a major confrontation was imminent. The dawn of June 4th marked the beginning of the decisive phase of the battle. The Japanese fleet, under the command of Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, launched its first wave of 108 aircraft, fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes, aimed at Midway Atoll. The objective was to neutralize American air defenses and pave the way for an amphibious invasion. The Japanese airstrike caused significant damage to Midway's installations, but American anti-aircraft fire and fighter planes managed to inflict losses on the attackers. Importantly, the airfield and runways remained operational, allowing US planes to continue launching sorties. Meanwhile, the American carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the hurriedly repaired USS Yorktown, were positioning themselves for a counterattack. Admiral Raymond A. Spruance, in command of Task Force 16, made the critical decision to launch a full-scale strike against the Japanese carriers, despite the great distance and uncertain enemy positions. The first wave of American aircraft to engage the Japanese fleet were the torpedo bombers. These slow, cumbersome planes flew at low altitudes, making them easy targets for Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft guns. Their attack was met with devastating resistance, and nearly all were shot down without scoring a hit. Although the torpedo bombers failed to inflict damage, their sacrifice was not in vain. They drew the Japanese combat air patrol down to low altitudes, creating an opening for the next wave of American attackers. Dive bombers from the Enterprise and Yorktown. At around 10:20 a.m., American SBD Dauntless dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey from the Enterprise and Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie from the Yorktown, arrived over the Japanese fleet. In a coordinated and devastating attack, the dive bombers targeted the carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. The Dauntless pilots achieved remarkable accuracy. Bombs penetrated the flight decks of the Japanese carriers, igniting fuel and ammunition stores. The carriers were quickly engulfed in flames, with explosions tearing through their hulls. The Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were effectively destroyed within minutes. The Japanese fleet, stunned by the ferocity and precision of the American attack, scrambled to respond. Admiral Nagumo, who had planned to launch a second strike against Midway, now faced the catastrophic loss of 3 of his 4 carriers. The remaining carrier, Hiryu, managed to launch a counterattack. Its planes found and severely damaged the USS Yorktown, which had already been hit during the Battle of the Coral Sea. Despite being crippled, Yorktown's crew managed to keep the carrier afloat, showcasing extraordinary bravery and tenacity. However, the Japanese retaliation was short-lived. American reconnaissance quickly located Hiryu, and subsequent strikes from Enterprise and Hornet's dive bombers sealed its fate, leaving it a burning wreck. With the destruction of Hiryu, the core of Japan's carrier striking force was obliterated. Over the next few days, American forces continued to pursue and attack retreating Japanese ships, sinking the cruiser Mikuma and damaging others. The Battle of Midway concluded on June 7, 1942, with a clear and decisive American victory. The immediate aftermath of the battle was a mixture of relief and reflection. The United States had lost the carrier USS Yorktown, the destroyer USS Hammond, and approximately 150 aircraft. However, these losses were overshadowed by the monumental defeat inflicted upon the Japanese. The Japanese Imperial Navy lost 4 of its most valuable fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with nearly 300 aircraft and over 3,000 men, including many experienced pilots and crew. This was a crippling blow that Japan could ill afford. The loss of these carriers and their air crews significantly weakened Japan's naval aviation capabilities. In the wake of their defeat at Midway, the Japanese High Command was forced to reassess their strategic situation. The loss of their carriers disrupted their plans for further expansion and forced them onto the defensive. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Midway operation, faced criticism but remained in command, understanding the dire need to rebuild and regroup. Japan's immediate priority was to replace the lost carriers and train new pilots. However, the industrial capacity of Japan was significantly inferior to that of the United States. While Japan could replace ships, the experienced aircrew and naval personnel lost at Midway could not be so easily replaced. This deficiency would haunt Japan throughout the remainder of the war. For the United States, the victory at Midway provided a much-needed morale boost and a strategic advantage. The balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted. With the Japanese carrier threat significantly reduced, the United States began planning its own offensive operations. The success at Midway allowed the United States to implement its island-hopping strategy. This approach aimed to bypass heavily fortified Japanese positions, focusing instead on capturing strategically important islands that could serve as bases for further operations. This strategy would allow the US to gradually move closer to Japan, cutting off Japanese supply lines and weakening their defensive perimeter. The first major offensive following Midway was the Guadalcanal campaign, launched in August 1942. Located in the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal was of strategic importance due to its airfield, which the Japanese were constructing to threaten Allied supply routes to Australia and New Zealand. The campaign was characterized by fierce jungle fighting, naval battles, and air engagements. The struggle for control of Guadalcanal lasted for 6 grueling months, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides. However, the United States ultimately emerged victorious, securing the island and beginning the long push towards Japan. The next significant campaign following Guadalcanal was the liberation of the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur, who had famously vowed to return after being forced to evacuate in 1942, led the campaign. Starting with the invasion of Leyte in October 1944, the campaign involved intense battles both on land and at sea. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, one of the largest naval battles in history, saw the near destruction of the remaining Japanese fleet. American forces, supported by superior naval and air power, gradually retook the islands, fulfilling MacArthur's promise and further isolating Japan from its occupied territories in Southeast Asia. Throughout 1943 and 1944, American forces continued their island-hopping strategy. Key battles included the capture of the Gilbert Islands, the Marshall Islands, and the Mariana Islands. Each victory brought American forces closer to Japan, providing bases for air operations and staging areas for further assaults. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were among the bloodiest of the Pacific War. Capturing these islands provided critical bases for the planned invasion of Japan. The fierce resistance encountered underscored the determination of the Japanese to defend their homeland at all costs. As American forces advanced across the Pacific, they began a strategic bombing campaign against Japan. The capture of the Mariana Islands allowed B-29 Superfortress bombers to reach the Japanese home islands. From late 1944 onwards, these bombers launched devastating raids on Japanese cities, industrial facilities, and transportation networks. The bombing campaign aimed to cripple Japan's war production and weaken civilian morale. The destruction wrought by these raids, combined with the naval blockade cutting off supplies, pushed Japan to the brink of collapse. The final and most controversial chapter of the Pacific War came with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The unprecedented devastation caused by these bombs, coupled with the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan, led to Japan's surrender. On September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, Japan formally surrendered, bringing World War II to an end. The victory in the Pacific had been hard-fought and costly, but it marked the dawn of a new era in global history. The Battle of Midway remains one of the most significant naval battles in history. It marked the turning point in the Pacific War, setting in motion a series of events that would lead to the ultimate defeat of Japan. The bravery and strategic acumen displayed at Midway continue to be studied and honored as examples of military excellence. Today, Midway Atoll stands as a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who fought there. The battle not only altered the course of World War II, but also shaped the post-war world order. The lessons learned at Midway emphasize the importance of intelligence, leadership, and the indomitable spirit of those who fight for freedom. The Battle of Midway was more than just a clash of fleets. It was a turning point that reshaped the course of World War II in the Pacific. It was a testament to the power of intelligence, the courage of servicemen, and the pivotal moments that can alter the fate of nations. As we remember the heroes of Midway, we honor their legacy and the profound impact of their victory on the world we live in today. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of pivotal moments in history. Until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.